You must have liked that intro.
Very much.
Thank you. Welcome back. Welcome back to Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast, where we told you we're going to continue to share life experiences. We have another amazing guest, Megan. Is it Callus?
A callus, like the things you
Callus.
get on your hands and your feet.
Okay. Callus. Okay, we got it. Meg, if you could come up and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then City Sid is going to kick off that first question.
All right, sounds very good. I'm going to keep this super short. I am a single mom of two teenage daughters. I have a business that I created basically because I had a lot of traumas in my life and I wanted to help others with theirs. And forgive my dogs in the background. Um, so I am here basically to share the fact that I feel that we all have our elements of pain and issues that we address, and that there's always hope. So here we are.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here with us. We do like to start with all of our guests with asking if any of the trauma that you've experienced in your life happened in your adolescent years. What was your home life like growing up, your home structure, your relationship with your family, or anything significant that you may have been through?
Sure. So basically, there have been little bits of challenges in every stage of my life so far, and they continue. Um, and so, in terms of my childhood, I grew up in what would be seen as, from the outside, a very ideal situation. I came from a father who owned his own business, a mother who would stay at home. I have an older brother. And there's lots of love in the family, but there were also some things that were less than stellar. I'll give you a story from when I was about 5 or 6. So I was sitting at the kitchen table, and this is back in the 70s. So you've got vegetables and flowers on the walls and orange furniture. Uh, and I, my mother asked me to do something, and I was a little belligerent at that age and said no. And my mother told me to do it again, and I started to cry. My mother did not feel that children should share emotions that were negative, that we were very privileged and should act accordingly and not be selfish. And in her view, any negative emotions were considered selfish. And so on the wall behind me was a giant wooden spoon, and that was the the tool that was used in my childhood to discipline. And so she took the spoon off the wall, put me on her lap, and I am to this day incredibly proud of the fact that that thing, that giant spoon, shattered, broke into numerous pieces on my butt. But it was one of many times where, again, I lived at a time period where I think there was a lot of women who were stuck at home in situations which were not ideal and very frustrating. And on the outside, they presented as if everything was perfect. But there was an inner rage, and that sometimes came out on us children. And although that was not an ideal situation, I also have numerous friends who experienced far, far, far worse than what I did.
Okay, so I'll start there, and then we'll go on. So, was that the worst? Just getting spanked with a wooden spoon?
So the wooden spoon and the belt were the means that I experienced. So again, I've had friends who anything that was within grabbing reach and so forth were used. So in comparison, it was pretty minor, but also not exactly ideal.
Okay, so the spankings were aggressive, spank.
Absolutely, as I said, like that was a giant. That's a big ass spoon that was shattered. So yeah, that wasn't exactly gentle.
Wow. So I'm assuming bruises and cuts, maybe.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So as I said, the biggest thing was that we were taught that emotions really were not allowed to be expressed. We were taught very specifically, and again, this is coming from a World War II mother. My parents were older when they had my brother and I. and children were not supposed to basically, they were to be seen but not really heard from unless it was something positive. And so unless we were smiling, unless it was a positive emotions, positive expressions, um, it was very, very much not allowed.
Now, were there any significant differences, I guess, on how your, individual parents parented? Was it just your mom that kind of had the strong hand, or, was she trying to keep you guys in line to, appease your dad? Like, how, was that kind of that structure, that build?
So it was pretty much a fairly traditional household during that time period. So my father worked late hours, and it was structured gender sort of roles, in the sense that my dad was there to bring home the money to support the household, to take care of things on that end, to do things outside of the house, including labor and so forth outside of the house. Inside was my mother, pretty much my mother's domain. So my father was not very involved in raising us.
And how did that affect you? Did that play a part with your dad working all the time with your emotions and expressing your emotions?
So I didn't understand any of this, as a little kid. None of us really understand the dynamics that we're going through. I think for me, what occurred was I learned very, very quickly, never to cry, never to get angry, never to again really express myself. That was, we were taught again that was just not acceptable behavior. And so that came into things that occurred and sort of additional challenges later on in my life, and my brother's life for that matter, when we became teenagers. That's when that started, that kind of environment started to show itself in our behaviors.
Now, were there any keen differences on how you and your, siblings were disciplined? Were there any?
I think I think for the most part I got a little bit more of of the aggression than my brother did, because as I said, I had a tendency to be a little more strong-willed. He was very, very easygoing. He was the easy child of the two of us, a lot more docile. And whereas I was bullheaded, stubborn, strong-willed, and more challenging. And so I definitely elicited more of that emotion. And again, understandable in some respects, when you're dealing with a one parent taking care of children, that's hard. And so I don't exactly think that how it was handled was appropriate, but I can also completely understand when responsibility is there just on one person, and things, and you don't have that freedom, to be who you want to be, that a rage can come to play.
Okay. So you mentioned that being able not to express your emotions, it later created additional challenges within your behavior. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure. So for me personally, I ended up, my brother got into trouble. And so he got arrested. There were issues. So he acted out. And so my parents, given the issues that he faced, decided that I would be better not going to the same high school that he went to, because they already knew of him as being this bad kid, and they didn't want me to be associated with that. So I ended up going to a private school, and the private school was a school of immense privilege and very definite girl kind of activity going on. And I was a bit of a target because I didn't fit in. I really didn't belong. Um, and instead of feeling an inner strength and a resilience to get through that, I just wanted to disappear. I just wanted to hide away, which they did for the most part. But that disappearance took on a different form, in the sense that I stopped eating, and developed a very, very severe eating disorder, and was hospitalized for 10 weeks with that.
And what were the I guess particulars, or I guess significant moments, that kind of pushed you towards that, where you, in fact, even overweight, or, worth even watching your weight? How did that kind of come into place?
I think it was an environment where most of the girls were on the thinner side to begin with, and I wasn't heavy, um, but they were particularly thin, and or it seemed that way, and I couldn't control anything in my environment, so I'm having trouble relating to people. I'm having trouble making friendships and feeling as if I belonged. Again, I would end up, being very isolated. So I'd have lunch and not really have anyone to have lunch with, and sit by myself. And I was just incredibly shy, and it was very challenging for me personally in this environment where people were making fun of the shoes you wore because they were, they're not from the high-end stores, and silly things like that. But for a young person, it's confusing. And so I think for me, and probably others who suffer from eating disorders, food was a way of controlling my environment, so, or controlling something. I couldn't control the environment around me, and the cruelty and the meanness that was all around me. And so what I could control was what I put into my body and my weight. And it truly was my means of trying to become smaller in an environment that felt hostile and where I could be a target. And so if I could just not be there, um, I that was kind of my choice. So I just started cutting out different food groups. I became a vegetarian. I didn't eat any meat. I would hide food at dinner tables, give it to my dog, and just fairly quickly became very, very thin.
I want to jump back just a little bit.
Sure.
So it sounds like you were bullied in school. Can you, and just to help with transparency with
Of course.
bullying for others, can you tell some of the things that the girls bullied you, and how it made you feel?
So I would not elevate what occurred to me at that level of bullying, because I think when you are fully bullied, it is incredibly dramatic and traumatic to the people that are affected by it. So I wasn't as much a target. Again, yes, people would make fun of my shoes. People would make fun of my clothes because I did not have high-end clothing. Um, but it was more for me watching other people, kids, be targets, and not want to be one, and not have the resilience and strength to stand up for others, and very much not want to be a target. Um, so I would put it in more of those terms than being the direct recipient of the bullying behavior. I more witnessed it and did not want to experience it, and was really more of an outsider to everything. Again, I was kind of more excluded. People just didn't invite me into their circles, into their friend groups.
And what, if any, were the first kind of health ramifications you saw with, kind of quickly cutting your diet, or, barely eating? Was there anything you started to notice regarding your health?
Well, I didn't suffer from any heart conditions or other things that people can suffer from doing this in long term. What I did find, especially nearing the end, so I'm 5'7", and by the time I was hospitalized, I was under 100 pounds. Um, so nearing the end in particular, everything was just full haze. My capacity to think clearly, to perceive things clearly, just wasn't there anymore, because there was no fuel for my brain. There wasn't any fuel for my body. Now, are there long-term ramifications? Sure. Like my circulation to this day isn't great. Um, I had surgery in my on my knee, and my foot became so blue, the doctors were very concerned. So yes, but at the time, I wasn't, um, other than anemia, facing any particular health issues other than not fueling my brain.
Okay. Did your parents ever notice a difference in your weight? Did they
Oh,
ever try?
absolutely.
So they tried to intervene. Is that where the going into getting medical treatment for some time? And how was the medical treatment? I guess a lot of folks, we've had folks come on with eating disorders, but we've never, I guess, Sid had a piece where someone was admitted to receive medical treatment.
So this was in the 90s, I guess, and the medical treatment was anything but stellar. Their end goal, of course, was to keep you alive. A lot of the people where I was, they would put tubes down our throats and force feed them. Um, if you did not gain weight at a certain rate, or if they saw you drop weight, they would threaten you with the feeding tube. It was a situation where we would be forced to eat immense calories in each meal, which was completely outside of what we've been doing, which was basically skipping meals and afraid to eat a grape. And they would require us to eat massive meals while the nurses would sit there and have a yogurt for lunch. So it was very hypocritical in terms of what we were experiencing and quite threatening. But again, I think their goal was to keep us alive. I wasn't really to rehabilitate us and get us to understand what had caused the behaviors and how to not continue those behaviors when we were released.
So did you find that, your reasoning for kind of trying to shrink yourself, do you think that, it was a mission accomplished, or, that it actually worked, or, and at what point did it just kind of become, pattern, just the way you live?
So that shrinking, I'll answer your questions in two ways. One, my attempting to shrink myself did the exact opposite of what I had wanted to do. So I wanted to disappear from those who could do me harm. And instead, I became the gossip of the school. Instead of being someone no one sort of knew or recognized, all of a sudden everybody knew who I was and what I had done to myself. So it did not help me disappear. But I will tell you that yes, that idea of wanting to disappear has always stayed with me to some degree, with the shift of I will make myself small when it comes to defending myself, but I will make myself very big when it comes to defending others. I think experiencing what I did in high school, and again, it was sort of on a lower level compared to many, but seeing people really act cruelly towards others, and not doing anything about it at that time sticks with you. And you say to yourself, I'll never do that again. I will never allow something that I don't believe in, and someone to be harmed on my watch.
I'm going to jump back just a little bit. In the hospital, do you think it was traumatic, them trying to shove tubes down your throat when you didn't want to eat? That doesn't sound like
No, it was horrible. No, it
getting
was forced.
proper help. Like, how were they even allowed to do that?
Because the wards are pretty much off limit to outsiders, and so they do it. Again, the goal at that time was keep these kids alive, or these people alive. And so it was not about, okay, we need to address the trauma and the issues, the psychological issues and turmoil that these kids are going through. It was, okay, we just want to make sure that they have nutrition so they don't have heart attacks or die. So no, a lot of people came out of that place in much worse states than they did. They had weight on them, but in much worse states than they did going on. It was awful. It was awful. And it was a space of fear, because the only reason we were eating was because of that fear of having that tube forced down our throats. It was not a welcoming, warm, loving environment. What it was, though, was a place for us to bond very closely to each other, because when you're in a situation like that, you hold on to to the folks around you who are dealing with it too.
With experiencing the wrong way to get over that or not or excuse me get through that, what have you found would be the proper kind of treatment for that situation instead?
I, I think it's a recognition that I would hope most professionals are aware of now, that food and you're either not eating food or eating too much food is a symptom of much other bigger issues. And so instead of just addressing the symptom, which is lack of food, it's addressing again the issues, the insecurities, the fears, the emotions, the histories, the traumas that the people who are dealing or had dealt with to bring themselves there. Eating disorders are very much like any other disorder, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's drug abuse. Food just simply is a tool to address or shove down the emotions that one can't handle otherwise, that are too scary to handle otherwise. So I think it's, the much better approach is giving people tools, and this is where I love the breath, to help cope with the difficult emotions that do arise, that are normal to all humans, and to provide the tools to say you are safe and to help people feel safe no matter what situation they are in, whether they don't feel safe outwardly or they don't feel safe inside their own bodies and what's occurring inside their own bodies. So having a much softer touch, not forcing food, because again, that's just a symptom, but instead helping those who are suffering learn to find more compassion and have more tools to help themselves.
And I have one last question on, I'm going to call it institution because
Sure, that's probably about right.
when y'all came out, do you think one of their tactics was to scare you so that you would eat food and not come back
Yes.
again? Did that work for you?
For me it did. For me it did, but there were other women who were in there multiple times. Um, so no, it did not work for everybody because it's such a hard forced um environment where that's not about creating self-compassion and compassion for others. That's you're going into this because you can't control your life. You're feeling out of control. And in a situation like that, that's just exacerbating those fears.
Did they have a therapist there?
Yes.
So did the therapy help?
No. Because again, and I think again, we've grown when it comes to mental health. We still have a long ways to go, and I love what you're doing because you're trying to move away from the stigmas. Um, People didn't talk about eating disorders then. They still don't to this day. I think it's still very much not treated with the compassion that it should because of all the messaging we get from the day we are born until the day we die about the size we're supposed to be, what is considered beautiful. Um, so I think they never addressed the larger societal messages that we were receiving and how to create the resilience and strength within to combat that and feel comfortable in our own bodies. It was more superficial.
And did your, I guess, parents feel like, that choice was justified or, that it was worth the sending you there? How was the outcome of that? Did you speak to them about what, was actually going on in there?
So, no, I did not actually tell them about the particular incidences that were occurring inside. We weren't a family that really talked to begin with. Um, they were very happy that I came out heavier than I came in, although it was fascinating. Two parts to that story is that when I came out, my mother said, "Oh, they made you gain too much weight." And then my father said, never ever do that again. The amount of money you cost me. So again, it gives you some insights into um,
So they
the
didn't even
family
motivate
environment.
you. How harsh.
So I think they were also scared to death, and so didn't know how to handle any of it. They weren't trained, didn't know, and so handled things with less than compassionate, gentle um, responses.
Okay. So now you're home. Did you have to go back to the same school that you used to go to? Because you said there's gossip going on. Now, when you went back, were you bullied or teased or made fun of going back? Did the environment of the school get even worse for you?
No, interestingly enough, I mean, there was not anyone who basically didn't approach me and ask me how I was doing and watched me at lunchtime in terms of whether or not I was eating. So that was disconcerting. But by that point in time, that was the end of my junior year. And so really it was that senior year, I switched, I switched into a group of people who had been bullied a lot, not treated well, and who had embraced me. I think they realized, okay, well, she's a weirdo like us, and so I was able to find a little footing, if you will, with a group that accepted me and accepted what had happened to me and didn't judge me for it.
Awesome.
So what's the next significant step after figuring everything out, getting through school? That wasn't were meshing well there. Where did you go next? And did the issues continue into other problems, or with other problems, or were you able to successfully get over it at that point?
So I continued to battle with the eating disorder in through college. But in college, I found more of a sense of purpose. So instead of just dealing with the insanity of high school and that high school environment, in college, I embraced um, sort of social justice and social justice movements and became very involved in various different causes at the same time as I was studying world religions and sort of expanding my understanding about different cultures and different ways of being in the world and understanding consciousness and how people um, move through the world based on their perceptions and their worldviews. Um, and so I think I found, as I said, a sense of purpose and a real curiosity about the world. And so college in time became a place of expansion. And as I said, just curiosity. And so I continued, I graduated early. I ended up going for a master's degree in environmental policy, working for an environmental organization, very gung ho, very okay. Now I can use sort of the trauma of my past to energize me in some respects, and go out and save the world, which was, as I said, I was very invigorated by all this. And then at that time, I went to a conference. It was actually the League of Mayors, municipalities down in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I was, someone slipped something in my drink and I was drugged and raped.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
so
So where do I
it,
start at? Um,
and you see me laugh, and this is, I will tell you this. So as I said, my childhood, I was not allowed to express negative emotions. This is where you'll see it. So I will talk about things that are negative and I'll smile because that is what I was trained to do. So that it continues to be part of my pathology, if you will. So when I say these things and you don't see an emotional reaction, it is because it's like it's still my training.
okay. So I guess I'm gonna start. I'm gonna finish with this. So you go to college, you still have a eating disorder, but you're not going back to this institution.
No, because it wasn't nearly as severe.
It
So
was
I was still controlling food. I was still very much managing what I was eating, but I wasn't at the real significant weight. My weight, as a matter of fact, went up and down quite a lot during that time.
okay. And then how long did that last, and what made you stop officially? Just like I'm done with the eating disorder. Mm.
I think it came to a point um, that for me, there was it's hard because there's multiple factors that came into this, but I was so tired of spending so much time and energy worried about what I was consuming, worried about how much weight I was gaining or not gaining, immense mental energy spent on these things. And I got to a place where I allowed myself to eat. That sounds strange, but instead of feeling that certain foods were off limits and I couldn't eat this or I should eat this, I made a commitment to myself for a short period of time to say, you can eat anything. I liberated myself. And in so doing, what I found is if I let myself eat anything, I didn't want to eat all of it. I always wanted that bite of cake. I always wanted that icing. I always wanted that bite of bread, but I didn't want the whole bread. I didn't want the whole cake. I wanted taste. And by doing that, by allowing myself to eat whatever I wanted to eat, by also being very tired of the energy and really wanting to focus myself. And as I said, being so involved in all these groups and organizations where we were trying to do good, my focus shifted. And so the combination of the two really culminated in a space where my relationship with food shifted. It wasn't controlling. And it could very well be because my environment, I didn't need to control my environment as much. I felt safer. I felt more in control of my destiny. I felt more in control in a positive way about the future and where things were going. And so I think the combination of the two, and as I said, just being so tired of the energy consumption, um, all these multiple factors, and having friends and that I could really rely on and speak to about everything, that support system, all these things came into play to sort of move me into a much healthier space when it came to food.
Now, I did hear you, mention incident you went through where you were sexually assaulted. What was the situation surrounding that? How did that occur?
So we were at this conference. So it was environmentalists and other groups as well as all of these mayors. And so it was basically getting in front of smaller governmental officials in order to provide information about what your goals were. Um, that night there was a group of us, and so it was predominantly environmental advocates and others, but it was, as I said, it was predominantly environmental advocates. And we went out to dinner. There was obviously it was at the casinos and the hotels, and so we went to the dinner in the bar with where we were. We were all drinking. We were all eating. I ended up going to the bar to get drinks. Someone at the bar had offered to buy a drink for me, and being young and not understanding the risks, I accepted that drink. And the only thing I remember past that point was um, the carpet of the Atlantic of the hotel, and then being the next memory was actually being outside of the hotel in the street, and that was about 2 or 3 in the morning. And so I went back, found my room, started to shower, realized that something had occurred, and drove that morning very, very early when the sun came up to Planned Parenthood to get a rape kit taken, to verify that I had been assaulted.
So my question to that is, this happened in the same hotel that you were in?
Yes.
They didn't have cameras. They couldn't identify who did that to you.
I did not pursue it at all. I was incredibly ashamed. I didn't have any recollection of what occurred. All I knew is that something had occurred. I was not aware of it. That's why I went to Planned Parenthood, to be honest, because I wanted, in essence, verification that something had happened, which I received. And then at that point in time, I was just completely filled with shame.
What
So I got in a space that I felt that I needed to find out who was responsible. I again just wanted to hide and disappear. I was so horrified that that I was just all I felt was shame
Why did you blame yourself?
because I was out drinking, because I was playing. Um, I was um, this is where I'm going to get emotional. I wasn't the perfect person. I didn't quote follow all the good girl rules. Um, and I didn't follow those rules. I broke them, and that was the consequence.
Do you ever, or do you still, stand on the fact that you made the right decision by not pursuing it? Did it, kind of help you? I wouldn't say brush it off, but just kind of pick yourself up and move forward, or do you ever wish that you did pursue it?
I'm almost reluctant to answer that question because I don't want anyone to use what I chose to determine their path, because I think any woman, any person who's been assaulted has so many factors to take into consideration in terms of whether or not they decide to pursue charges. Um, for me personally, not living in that space of what had occurred to me and in many respects bypassing it, um, I think for me personally was the best option. I loved my work. I loved my colleagues. I loved the environment that I had created. Um, to have shifted everything into, okay, I've been assaulted and now we have to focus in on that and in on me instead of the work to be done would have been more devastating, um, than choosing to just sort of say, okay, this happened and I'm moving on.
But would you recommend to another female to stand up and to say something? Because I can only imagine the therapeutic piece of it and holding on to it has to travel along with you, not getting that help that you need. And going through something like that, how do we give women power to stand up and say, hey, this is not okay. I was violated, and no matter what happens, I did, drinking or not, I deserve justice.
So I agree with you wholeheartedly that I think that it is incredibly important, and thank God for the Me Too movement that said, hey, this happens way too frequently. This should never happen, and we need to start saying something, and we need to be okay saying something. Um, and so, yes, I think having that voice and articulating not only helps generally you get past it, but also helps other people who could potentially be at risk, if you didn't, or provides that momentum that hopefully starts shifting the immense amount of assaults that take place. With that said, I will also say I honor and respect any decision a woman or anyone who has been assaulted makes, because at the end of the day, it is their it's almost like saying their body, their choice, their mind, their body, their soul, what they need is what they need to do.
And what was it that you, or what method, or activities? What was your choice method of getting through that
I
incident,
would,
if anything?
not much. I became very suicidal during that time.
And from
Uh,
that being said, were there any actual attempts? Did people in your life see what was going on? What was life like at that time?
no, I'm pretty good at masking, and not sharing. Um, there was one incident where it had gotten to the point where I was ready to leave this world. And I was incredibly fortunate. This is where I believe in higher powers, where I very serendipitously ran into a friend, and she just saw how dark I was. And she embraced me and she stayed with me, making sure that I would make it through that day, make it through that night, and be okay. So um, it was it was one of the most challenging periods of my life. I've had many. That happened to be one of the most challenging.
I can see this is a bit a lot, and thank you for sharing that to help another woman, because there are so many women that go through this. So thank you for your transparency. We truly appreciate it. Um, I want to go to the next. After going through the sexual assault, attempting suicide, trying to move on, just trying to figure out life, what was next after that?
So I was it's putting all the pieces together. So after that, I ended up getting married and having two exquisitely beautiful daughters, who are my life to this day. Always will be, I suppose. And so I think, again, what is amazing about life is that there are times it is so exceptionally bleak and crushes you, shatters you completely. But if you keep breathing, if you keep going, um, light shows up in unexpected places and in unexpected ways. And my daughters, were and will always be an exceptional light. So I think they were remarkable to me with that. Now, interestingly enough, when they were young, I ended up getting divorced from their father. And there's more stories there, because I divorced and I was the one who asked for the divorce. Their father ended up in another relationship, fell madly in love. This person, we were planning on getting married, and then one day, almost 3 years ago, he just got up and left. Uh, uh, he just said he was done. I was completely blindsided. We were completely blindsided. And so again, this is why I say my life has been, in many respects, one sort of traumatic incident after the other. And I can share these stories, and people are like, that's impossible. Like, how can someone have one thing and then another and then recover and then have another and yet have another? I think my life is actually, in many respects, designed to be this way. I've come to terms with the fact that uh, traumas, it's not that I'm a magnet for them, but I think my life here on this planet is almost to experience all of this so that I can have compassion for and understand what other people go through. So that's the other piece. That's the next element of where life took me.
So, what was the defining moment of pulling together Boundless Breath, creating it, the idea for it? Was there just like a spark, like, hey, this is, what the direction I want to go in, or do you feel like it was a long time coming? What was the kind of motivation behind the creation of that?
So I think it's multiple reasons. So I've always been a seeker since high school, trying to understand the world and trying to understand why people do what they do, and where there is light and how we can share light. I love the idea that in each of one there is a candle of light. There is light within us, and it can get very dim, but we learn to fan those flames, and spread that light around us. So I think Boundless Breath was in the making since I was very young. I ended up studying applied neurology. That's another part of this whole story. After I did environmental work and after my divorce, I ended up studying fitness and applied neurology. Very interested in pathways of the brain and how they impacted not just how we moved and how our body functioned, but how we felt. And studying all of that, I learned about respiration and how much our breathing impacts our emotional states and our brain states, and vice versa, how much our emotional states and brain states impact our breathing. And so I think it combined these elements of who I am, and this desire to both do good in the world as well as address the challenges that I have faced all my life, and wanted to help others address their challenges, with a tool that's completely free that we all have access
Okay. I wanted to ask real quick, going through the emotions of a divorce, because there are a lot of folks that go through divorce and mentally it's
to. Horrible,
a horrible.
very challenging.
Yeah. Can you tell us some of the things that you went through with him, with your ex-husband, just up and leaving?
So it wasn't my ex-husband that upped and left. That was my fiance after my husband and I got divorced.
Okay, so you divorced your husband
I
and then
divorced my husband, and then I got engaged and to someone else, and then he was the one who ended up and leaving. I know
okay,
there's a lot.
okay. Hey, I'm just trying to catch it, make sure we catch it right. So what was it like your fiance that you were in love with him? He just
Absolutely.
up and left.
Left.
And I
Yes.
wanted to, is that your daughter's father or
No, that was their going to be stepfather.
okay,
So very much involved in their life and very much a father figure, but not biologically, not their father. Just
okay,
someone who had lived with us for about 8 years.
okay. So that's a long time. So what was the impact? What was the challenges that you faced after him up and leaving?
So that was multiple impacts. So of course, just the devastation. I mean, when he left, I was truly that day on the floor sobbing hysterically because again, was completely blindsided, and this was the person I was planning on spending the rest of my life with. Um, but as well as the fact that we had become financially dependent on him. So, despite the fact that I was working, my income didn't bring in nearly enough to support our household. And so, him leaving, and especially leaving that abruptly, left us in a horrible financial situation, resulting in me having to sell our home, move. So all of that. I think it was exceptionally challenging for me to understand what had happened, why it had happened, shake myself off, and get my kids through that because it was so traumatizing. My youngest daughter had actually said to me, "I'm afraid he's going to come back and kill us," which he was never violent, was never going to be violent. That wasn't who he was. Um, but after going to a trauma therapist, what where that came from is when there is someone you know and someone you think you know everything about them, and they do something so unexpected, um, that especially for children, they can wonder what else is he capable of. And so there was a period where the three of us, my daughters and I, really had to go through counseling and go through a lot of conversations and a lot of trying to figure out the pieces, um, to understand how, how our world just got smacked, off its axis, and how to deal with that. And I had to pick myself up. Thank goodness, in some respects, um, I because my children were harmed by this emotionally, that moved me from a space of devastation and emotional incapacitation to anger, because you don't harm my children. And so anger can be activating, and that is precisely what allowed me to cope through that, because my goal was simply to protect them and keep them safe. And how dare you, um, harm my children?
Um, so was there or has there been a moment yet where you feel like you've actually reached a moment of happiness and like togetherness with yourself, and if not, what does that picture look like for you? Whether how complicated or simple it may be, what does that look like for you particularly?
I absolutely love that question. And I particularly love that question because you said, or not, and what does that look like for you? My life continues. I'm still picking up the pieces from what occurred, 2.5 years ago. Still trying to figure out how to support myself and my daughters. Uh, Still figure out how to be in relationships and things like that. So I wouldn't say I have found my place of grounding and centering. And I think particularly now in a world to me that has gone completely mad and is more cruel than ever, it I can feel even more untethered. But at the flip side, when you go through all the challenges that I have, you learn to pick yourself up and wake up and do what needs to be done. Um, you learn to have great appreciation for little moments. The time when I am with my daughters, when we're making dinner together, when we're doing homework together, when I get to look outside and see a beautiful sunset, the magic and appreciation I have for the smallest things is amazing. And I've learned to just breathe through the uncertainty and know that there will be something on the other side. You just have to keep going. You just have to keep breathing, and you just have to keep sharing a sense of hope and love, with yourself and others. So I know that can sound like a little, oh, everything's dandy and it's going to be rainbows. I don't believe that's always the case, but I do believe that if we care for, if we find those moments of magic, because they exist everywhere, even in the most dire circumstances, and if we reach out and say, hey, we're going to get all of us somehow, we're going to get through this together, and you keep coming at this with a sense of we're just going to make it. We're just going to make it, and we're going to love each other through it. That's how I move through my days.
Beautiful. And see, you talk about, I was going to ask it simple. I was going to ask, how are you doing today? So it summed up the last question I was going to ask. But we're almost at time. And I'm just going to follow up. Based from your life experiences, what can you share with others that helped you start the journey to healing?
I think having people you can talk to, if it's one person that you can have conversations with, is enormous. And even if it's not a person, if it's your pet, being able to express yourself and share where you are is so incredibly important to the healing process. And truly recognizing that, A, if you take a few breaths, slow breaths, you can sort of shift that fear and that frustration and move through it. And as I said, every single day, no matter what you are facing, has a mini miracle in it, has light in it. You just have to keep looking for that, even when everything feels and seems so dark. There's always something. There's always something that's light. There's something that is magical. And just keep looking for that magic.
Thank you again for being here with us this evening. We do like to close our shows out with letting our guests participate in shameless plug. So with all of your information scrolling across the bottom here, please let our viewers know how they can contact you, utilize your services. If there's anything you want to advocate for, draw traffic to, if you have anything for sale, you have the floor.
Well, thank you for that opportunity. My company is Boundless Breath. My website is boundlessbreath.us. If you ever even just want a few tools to help you manage the emotions that you have during your days, and particularly now manage what's going on in the world, please reach out. This is something I'm really passionate about and I want to help people. So even if you just want to email me and ask, hey, can you share 5 breathing techniques to help me make it through my day? I will gladly share that with people. We're all in this together. So just reach out to me and I'll embrace you and share what I have.
Thank you so much. We want to thank you for sharing your testimony and being a guest on Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast, where we are going to continue to share life experiences. Ain't that right, City Sid?
That's right.
Yes. Your testimony was powerful, Meg. You have been through so much. And I just hope that you continue. Breathing helps a lot. So I love the boundless breathe because I use those techniques as well because it definitely calms folks. So I would recommend that to anyone. But that you continue your journey and that you're protected with positive energy and remain in peace because that is a lot to go through. And a lot of us have been through a lot and we're still standing. And may your testimony help someone else that has been through a similar situation or pieces of your life experience may help you. So I want to thank you for being a guest.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for doing this and letting people share their stories and have us all try to help each other and make it through.
Thank you. We asked if you can hold a second when we end. Thank you for tuning into Unfiltered Unspoken podcast, where we're going to continue to share life experiences. Please go to YouTube and like, share, subscribe to our channel. It is Unfiltered Unspoken podcast. The logo that you see in the background is the logo that you will see that will pop up. Come share, come help support us. All proceeds, once we hit numbers, will partially go to supporting our nonprofit organization. We are giving back to community, specifically kids, because a lot of the life trauma start as a child and it escalates into an adult. Have a blessed day. Peace.